as soon as we got in there, like sirens going off. There's so much code that's running that's unnecessary to take a lead when you convert it and create a custom object instead of the other stuff and
Yeah.
try to do everything that's supposed to do for
Yeah.
no reason. There was
Yeah.
no good reason. So it's things like that where we see people go outside of the normal process without really knowing what they're doing, where they're getting in trouble.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Salesforce started as a CRM, but then they grew in many different areas. It has grown to an extent that it has become almost like a platform. But even though Salesforce might come across as you can build pretty much anything on the platform, there are limitations. Most people don't understand how bad these limitations might fire back, especially if you plan to over-customize the system. Planning to customize would require you to understand how each objects link to each other and how deep you can go while creating these objects. In today's episode, our guest, Hunter Austin, discusses the opportunities and limitations of the Salesforce platform. He also discusses why companies struggle with the Salesforce platform and what they need to know to be successful with it. Finally, he discusses the vertical and horizontal relationships of the Salesforce platform and why you need to understand them to be able to get the analytics you would need to be successful with the platform. Let me introduce Hunter to you. Hunter Austin has more than 20 years of experience in the Salesforce ecosystem and has worked for and with many Salesforce consulting firms over the years. In 2020, he formed Kelly Austin, a Dallas-based Salesforce consulting firm, with his brother-in-law, Dylan Kelly. In 2022, the firm became one of the fastest Salesforce partners to ever attain Crest or Gold status. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Hunter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. Looking forward to talking today.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I think you have a lot of case studies. It's always my pleasure to get into those case studies. But before we do that, do you want to start with your quick intro and what you're focusing on these days?
I will. Absolutely. So I'm currently managing partner and co-founder of Kelly Austin. So we are a consulting firm. We mainly focus on Salesforce consulting. It's implementations, managed services, etc. So Salesforce is kind of our bread and butter for sure, but we end up working with a lot of other systems because we have clients that have Salesforce and then want to integrate with their ERP or, a separate accounting system or insert here, right? Lots of different things. So we're technology consulting, but a lot of it tends to revolve around Salesforce.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so I think we are going to peel layers into, what kind of engagements you are doing. And I don't know if the audience is going to be familiar with where Salesforce ecosystem is positioned. So maybe you can give a rundown of that. But before we do that, we have one of the standard questions that we ask every single guest. And that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
So is that our business growth or business growth in general?
It's really for the audience overall, I guess, from this episode perspective. So it's an open-ended question. What is your personal perspective on business growth?
It's actually a hot topic for us right now. So I'll answer what we've kind of come up with. Now, we're a services business, right? So I'm answering from that perspective.
Yeah.
But what we've realized is that the growth is so much harder if you don't bring in the right people as you grow. Trying to grow with people that aren't as talented as they need to be makes everything infinitely harder when growth comes into play. And growth's very easy if you hire the right people, right? It happens naturally. More clients come, it's easier for people to work with. People are less stressed out because they're working with good people. So that is my current perspective on growth.
No, could not agree more. I think we share the similar problems, I guess, because we are, very similar industries. And yes, sometimes people claim that they have done a lot, but, they cannot execute in the real world. So that becomes a real challenge, I guess.
That is very true.
Right. Okay. So let's go back to Salesforce ecosystem, right? So maybe give us a little bit of rundown in terms of, let's say, somebody is engaging in the Salesforce ecosystem for the first time, and let's say our listener base is going to be primarily manufacturing, distribution, retail centric organizations, but they don't even understand the difference between CRM and ERP, I guess.
Yep.
So maybe give us some rundown in terms of what are the strengths of Salesforce, where you have seen the biggest success from the Salesforce perspective, and what kind of clients you like to engage with, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll use a manufacturing client actually just to tell a quick story or illustrate a quick story.
Yeah.
This manufacturing client, they have, I think, two Sales Cloud licenses. All right.
Okay.
So when Salesforce first started back in early 2000s, late 90s, they started as just sales CRM,
Yep.
right? Like your basic CRM.
Yeah.
Put in your pipeline, track your activity, that type of thing. And that's Salesforce's bread and butter. And a lot of people still think of Salesforce as only being that, right? Only used by sales teams. But it's come so far in the last 10 years in terms of the evolution of Service Cloud to manage things like customer service, onboarding, et cetera, et cetera. Marketing, they've spent a ton in their email marketing platforms, digital marketing, that type of thing. And then for on the manufacturing side, the conversation that I was just talking about, and this is a subcontracting company.
Okay.
They had no idea that Salesforce had a field service technology as part of the play, right?
Yeah.
Didn't even know Salesforce played in that space.
Right.
And it's a huge product for Salesforce.
Yeah.
So we work to answer your question, the industries that we kind of focus on as a firm. If you go to our website, you'll see we have customer stories across multiple industries, but our kind of focus is high tech and then manufacturing, automotive, and energy. So that's how Salesforce goes to market. They group MAE, manufacturing, automotive, energy. So that's why I kind of say those three together. And then high tech's the other one. Those are the big four for us.
Okay, so let's peel a little bit in these industries, and they all have their own sort of flavors. And I'll talk, more from our perspective, and you can provide commentary in terms of, what you have seen overall from the success perspective, right? So when you look at manufacturing, I don't know. Obviously, I mean, depending upon the size of the company as well. If you look at and I don't know whether you play in more of the enterprise space, SMB space, and depending upon what SMB is, I guess, everybody's going to have their own versions of definition as well, right? But let's say if you look at the CRM consumption, because most of the SMBs, I mean, they don't even understand what an ERP is, to be completely honest. Okay. CRM typically get adopted a lot more, just because they have to manage the customers, relationships, right? So they're going to have the adoption of that. But these three industries are very, very uniquely different in my mind, at least. The way their business models are, the way their channels are, the way they go to market. So maybe touch on each of these industries and where you see any sort of challenges, where you have seen more success. So talk about that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So let me use the two big ones. I'll contrast high tech versus manufacturing.
Okay.
All right, because we operate both, and they both are very, very different sales cycles when they operate. Right, our tech companies are typically they're high growth, or at least they were until last year, right?
So define what high tech is from your perspective. So because high tech could mean a lot of different things as well, right?
Absolutely. 90% of what high tech is B2B SaaS.
Okay.
So when I say high tech, I'm typically talking about B2B SaaS.
Okay.
For the most part.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And then manufacturing kind of runs the gamut between process and discrete. We work with both, and it could be manufacturing all up and down the. So when we're selling to each of those, right? High tech is very interested. They're like all in on their sales team. Right. Lead generation, marketing, push people through the funnel, automate it. Product-led growth, right? How can they upsell a client without having to have a salesperson involved?
Right.
Revenue intelligence is a Salesforce product that lets them go deeper into the analytics of their sales pipeline and forecasting, all that stuff. all that stuff, they are on top of it, right? And they
Yep.
are ready to buy because
Yep.
they're trying to be better than the competitor so that they get
Yep.
more dollars, right? And funding
Yep.
to stay alive. On the manufacturing side, it's a much slower process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're interested in different products, right? The
Yep.
field service
Yeah.
product sells
Yeah.
really well with manufacturing. No
Yeah.
one in high tech buys field service, right? We don't go to it all. The marketing side of things, it actually has started to grow with our
Yeah.
manufacturing clients. They're starting to be more interested, but that's a recent occurrence. Beforehand,
Yeah.
manufacturing, we were like, well, who are we marketing to, right? Like, what? They didn't have any marketing staff.
Yeah.
They weren't doing these email journeys or text journeys or anything like that with in manufacturing. So they were more focused. They were of course focused on sales, but then you get into some of the more operational processes you can build on the Salesforce platform,
Yeah.
right? Where we started getting into things like demand planning.
Yeah.
We're always integrating with the ERP on the
Yeah.
manufacturing side, right? Because we've got to tell that full story.
Yeah.
And we've got to have visibility between those two systems and those two departments. So they're way more focused on that side of the house, ERP, field service, things like that. Whereas on the high tech side, it's sales, marketing, sales,
Yeah.
sales,
Yeah.
marketing,
Yeah.
sales.
Yeah, yeah. So very interesting commentary, and I'm going to offer some more commentary there. And I don't know if you're going to have any sort of follow-ups. If you have any stories, obviously share those as well. But overall, I guess when I look at the manufacturing versus high-tech conversation, in general, I don't think it's going to be purely industry. It also differs based on the product that they are selling. What is their sales cycle? What is going to be their business model? Okay, I'll give you some examples here. Okay, so let's say if we look at even high tech, for the most part, high tech in your definition, some people might see that, okay, electronics manufacturing, are you talking about when you say high tech, because they could mean high tech there, right?
Sure.
So here we are talking about software companies, SaaS companies. They are very well funded in general. Their sales cycle is going to be very, 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 very long. Sometimes it takes forever, right? For them to close. Some may have very short sales cycle as well, but for the most part, we are looking for very involved engagement in general, the way engagement is. Now, let's contrast this with manufacturers, right? So depending upon what you're producing and what your business model is. So some manufacturers, they don't do any sales or marketing. They don't have to do it.
Yep.
Because they have been running this business based on word of mouth. They are connected in the industry. Everybody sort of knows them. What is the point of sales and marketing? They can go to a trade show. That's the max that they are going to do. Otherwise, they don't have to worry about sales and marketing. So that's their stage, right? In my mind, when I look at CRM platform or ERP platform, field service, they all have their own sort of depth based on the business model, and they could have place in the architecture in general. So I don't know, based on this commentary, do you share the similar opinion that business model and the sales cycle, that drives a lot of different things? And that's where I guess, we need to identify which technology is going to be right fit. Do you share or go ahead?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. And there's always outliers, right? Like there's always some people in manufacturing we've got some clients who are doing a lot of marketing, right?
Yep,
because of what they sell, right? Because they don't have the same 20 accounts that they've been selling to for 25 years, right? Or they're trying to break into a new geography or something like that. So I totally agree. It definitely depends on what stage you're at as a company, right? Is growth a goal? Are you trying to get into a new service line? Are you trying to get a new geography? Things like that. A lot of it depends on, and that's how we pretty much always start our consulting engagements, right? What are you coming to us for? What is the ultimate goal? Are we growing top line? Are we improving bottom line? Are we trying, to prevent from hiring, 20 FTEs to service our customers? Those types of things, because it absolutely matters what the goal is overall.
Yeah, so maybe let's go one level deeper overall in the conversation in one of these stories and, describe the business model, describe the challenges, maybe describe the as-is architecture, how they were doing things, describe the challenges, what were there in that, and what was the approach taken. It doesn't matter whether it succeeded or failed. What I am really interested in the details of the story, So go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll use an example from a company that a little bit crosses the line of both high tech and manufacturing.
Okay.
So they manufacture hardware.
Okay.
They then sell that hardware directly to the end customer.
Okay.
They sell maintenance. They sell maintenance on that hardware, but then they also sell software that works on that hardware.
Okay.
Okay. So this is in the financial services kind of realm, right? But they do manufacturing, and then there's tech involved too. So they do both. So it's a great use case because we've got multiple things involved here, and it crosses both of our industry lines. So we were able to pull some of our expertise from our other tech clients for part of the engagement, and then manufacturing for the other part of the engagement. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the challenges that we came into. They had been a Salesforce customer for 10 years.
Okay.
Never could get adoption from their sales team. All right. So they had multiple partners come in, try different things. They would rebuild the sales cycle or something like that. And it just wasn't working. They ended up never getting adoption. So we came in, we tried to get to the root problem. And the root problem for them has always been that all of their ERP data, all right, none of that is coming back into Salesforce at any point, or no data from Salesforce is going into the ERP.
Okay.
All right. So all we're seeing, what in that case, what that means is that we aren't using any forecasting or pipeline that Salesforce gives us. To then give to then give that data to the ERP so that they know what's coming. Right? It's not there. It's never been there. So no one was then looking at the sales team and saying, hey, you need to have your opportunities in the CRM early on because we're trying to forecast and all of our forecasting runs off of that data. Right? None of that was being done. Then what happened is that you'd get a sales manager who would just simply ask for a spreadsheet of their deals to know where they are. And some of those might be in Salesforce. Some of them, they might just go add into the CRM, right? You had 3 or 4 salespeople who would use it because they saw the value, and then the rest of the team would just go fill out that spreadsheet. So we did a couple things here. We built out this model, and we've done this. It works really well with semiconductors as well. A couple semiconductor companies we've done also. But essentially, what we're doing is we're building out the ability to, when you have this opportunity, so you close the opportunity, right? You get a commitment. Say it's 100 units, all right? But we don't know exactly when the customer is going to take delivery on those 100 units, right? So in Salesforce, we built out a component that allows us to say, okay, we got commitment on these 100 units. I'm going to estimate that they're going to take 25 in January, 25 in March, 25 in June, 25 in October. Right? Okay. So we have that data. That data can then feed into the ERP from there. And then more importantly, the ERP data, once we get that order actually placed and they are going to take delivery on it, now that ERP data feeds back into Salesforce to tell us, hey, they actually only ordered 20 in January, not 25. So you've got 5 left over. Now, where do you think it's going to go, right? Salesperson, get on the phone, figure out, right? What's changed? And maybe you need to move those 25 that we had set in March. Maybe those need to be pushed out to April, right? But now they've got the ability, because what we've built out, to see what's potentially going to close, right? With open opportunities. See what has been closed and is forecasted for delivery. And then see what actually came in. Right. So from a full view on that customer, or we can go product level too. That's the other thing that's important on manufacturing, right? How many of this SKU, right, is planned for April? Do we think is coming in, right? And of course, it's all variable, but the data that we are able to give them now for that, a couple things happen. One, now salespeople have to put their information in the CRM, because they're looking at that data coming down the pipe and saying, hey, is this accurate or not? There's no more spreadsheets. It's either in there and it's feeding the ERP, or you didn't put your data in. And then 2, it gives leadership a holistic view to see how are we doing compared to forecasting, right? Are we accurate in these numbers? Do we need to ask better questions? Are people actually ordering when they say that they're ordering, right? Or is there a delay that we need to account for going forward? all that data is now visible, whereas previously it's just they were guessing. So I'll stop there. But that was kind of like the big crux of this project.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is great. I love the details there, and we are going to peel a little bit more overall. So
Sure.
obviously the problem here seems to be one of the problems, I guess, is always going to be adoption. Regardless of the system that you are going to have, you are always going to struggle unless you train a lot and you really, and a lot of times, I don't know if you notice this in your space or not, they sort of underestimate the amount of training these technologies are going to require, an amount of hand holding that people are going to require in general to be effective with their workflows. And if they are not going to be effective with their workflows, obviously you are not going to get the data, right? And obviously you are trying to get the data to be able to plan better, to be able to forecast your capacity. That's the overarching intent. So here, when you look at these engagements, are you always building the demand forecasting inside the CRM component? Obviously, you're trying to bring a lot of data inside the CRM. So describe a little bit more there. Is it happening inside certain industries, or do you guys see this whole demand planning component sitting inside the Salesforce? And if you have that inside Salesforce, what are these companies trying to do with that demand data? Are they looking for that demand data to be able to look at their workflow, or are they planning their whole sales function, or are they also making any sort of operational decisions based on that data? So touch a little bit more there.
Sure. Manufacturing is the main place we've seen usage for this type of component. With the demand planning, and it's even more so. Those companies that take a commitment and then delivery comes later. Right. Opposed to you place an order, we're going to go fulfill that order now. Right. It's more these companies that take that commitment up front and then need to figure out when it's actually coming, because typically they don't get paid until the delivery happens. Right. That commitment is a piece of paper, but if they never actually place the order, then the company never gets paid. Right. So it's that industry that we see this specific example for. So there's a couple things in play here. Since we don't get paid until they take order, right? When we're saying 25 come in January, 25 come in March, that's revenue forecasting.
Right.
In reality, right? Like the first time we closed that opportunity and got that commitment, it's a pat on the back, right? Like it's step one. But until that order's placed, we haven't achieved anything, you know? So when we're scheduling it out, it is revenue planning. It's revenue forecasting. When's the money actually going to come in? And then it's forecasting in terms of when do we need to order parts? When do we need to have these systems built, right? Because we can see, we're projected to have a super heavy June for delivery of this SKU or that SKU or these bundles, whatever it may be. So having a place to plan that out accomplishes both those things: revenue forecasting and manufacturing forecasting.
So very interesting. So when you look at this planning component, and I guess planning component is going to be critical in the other industries as well. Here, the process that you are talking about, and I don't know if this is the same process, but it does seem like more of the, and I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's called the blanket order. So blanket order, typically the way they work is, and sometimes even the blanket order could be all over the place, because these companies didn't understand what blanket order is supposed to mean. And what they do is, and you are describing it as more of the commitment, right? So they are going to have, it's some sort of a contract, as you mentioned, but then you are going to have these releases. And the process that you are describing is the releases that you are doing based on whenever they are going to need. And that's a real financial transaction, I guess, that you have overall, from the transaction perspective. So that's a blanket order functionality. That's very interesting way of implementing it, to be completely honest. So do you see any other planning scenarios in any other industries by any chance like this? Or, let's say if you talk about high tech, in high tech also, my understanding is going to be that they must be planning their resources. They need to plan for resources. They need to plan their projects as well. So I don't know Do you see similar trends there overall from the demand planning perspective, or this is a unique case in this industry?
Yeah, the resource planning, because we use Salesforce internally to plan
Yeah,
all of our resources, right?
exactly.
It's a spin on that component that we use for demand planning, right?
Right, right.
Similar type of functionality. What opportunities are in the pipeline and
Yeah,
what resources do they need? How
yeah,
close are they to closing?
yeah.
Right. And then when are we actually going to kick off the project? When's the project going to go? That's the exact same thing that we do. Otherwise, with tech, with like a B2B SaaS,
Yeah.
since we're able to give licenses away pretty quickly,
Right, right, right.
we don't see a ton of having to plan ahead there.
Yeah,
But on the services side, absolutely, it's a very similar process
yeah,
and similar component that we use that allows you to do all of that inside of Salesforce. And again, the real benefit of doing any of this in Salesforce
yeah,
is that it's on the same platform as your sales,
yeah,
so that you can tie that all together, because sales is the leading indicator of all these things,
yeah.
right? So that's why we push to do it in Salesforce, because it's tied directly to sales.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Okay, so let's touch on the service side a little bit, and I don't know if you're going to have any specific stories there.
Sure.
So in the example that you mentioned, I guess they are going to do a little bit of service component as well.
Yeah.
The way they are delivering their equipments along with software. So
Yep.
touch, what kind of stories you are seeing in the service space? What kind of trends are you seeing there?
Yep. So a lot of people in Salesforce calls it case, right?
Yep, yep,
Cases is what they use for support tickets or anything
yeah,
like that. So if I
yeah,
say cases, that's what I'm talking about, tickets.
yeah,
A lot of people, when they think about the ability to use technology in general to handle service in cases, all they think about is customer has a problem. They send the email to support@blank.com, and support agent needs to go back in there and write back, right?
yeah, yeah,
And we set that up all the time, right? That's table stakes. There's knowledge bases. A lot of the Salesforce service GPT stuff is coming out right now, where there's auto replies, and they will build a knowledge article versus off of a case that you've created,
yeah, yeah,
things like that. But in this instance, with this customer I'm talking about, which we
yeah,
see what they've taken advantage of, cases and Service Cloud in general, is to handle the implementation of their hardware,
okay,
or the installation of their hardware, right?
okay,
Because it allows them to open up this order and say, all right, we know for this SKU, these are our stages, right? These
yeah,
are the people that need to be involved. We
yeah,
need automated notifications going out, letting
yeah,
people know this is your service date. This is what we're doing now. We need this document, those types of things.
yeah,
So using the technology to track those stages in the installation process,
yeah,
right? And then be able to build cases off of that too, right? So
yeah,
think you've got like a master case,
yeah,
and then someone has a complaint
yeah,
during the installation process.
yeah,
Now that case can be tied
yeah,
to that overall process,
yeah,
right? So then you're building all of it off of that case in Service Cloud,
yeah.
which is a little bit of a unique way that a lot of people don't think about using service and technology to handle it.
Okay, so very interesting. So let's talk about Salesforce data model a little bit. And I'm pretty sure, Hunter, one of the problems that you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation is the resources. We all struggle with that, right? Now,
Sure.
when you are going to get into any implementation, if Hunter is going to do any implementation, that is probably going to be state of the art. But let's say if you have a junior guy who claims that they know everything, but then, we know how that goes, right? So
Sure.
let's talk about some of the limitations overall in terms of where Salesforce is going to be a great fit, from the data model perspective. What is possible, or where it's going to be a pure disaster, I guess.
You absolutely don't want to go try to build like your accounting software, by yourself on the Salesforce platform. There
Yeah.
are accounting apps that handle your GL
Yeah,
that have been built on the Salesforce platform. That's different. There's some really good ones out there.
yeah,
But you wouldn't from scratch go to try to build your GL on the
Yeah.
Salesforce platform. You also wouldn't try to build your ERP on the Salesforce platform.
Yeah.
Again, there's some apps, there's some
Yeah.
really good ones out there that have built on it, but it's really not designed. You're going to hit limitations really quickly on trying to do something like that on your own. What we typically recommend, and another place that we see people get in trouble,
Yeah.
is they'll try to they hear that Salesforce is customizable. You customize it to your business. You do all
Everything
those
is
things.
customizable, right?
Right. And it is. It is all to a certain extent. But what we'll see is people take the fundamental things, like the fundamental pieces of Salesforce's architecture, like
Yeah.
leads,
Yeah.
how when leads get converted, it creates a contact account and an opportunity,
Yeah.
right? Opportunities get then when they're closed, you create orders. Those are standard objects is what Salesforce calls it.
Yeah.
What we'll see is we'll see people try to take some of that functionality and either use it for different parts of the business it wasn't designed for, or they'll try to custom create their own objects instead of using the standard objects. People get into trouble real fast there if they're not working with someone that who absolutely knows what they're doing and understands all the potential repercussions. The other thing that you run into is, say you're using a custom object for opportunities because of whatever reason you decided. Well, as Salesforce goes and releases all these new AI capabilities and all that, guess what? You don't get to take advantage of any of it because it's all built into the standard objects, right? So those are some of the big areas where we see people get out of limitations quickly, or they find themselves 2 years down the road coming to us and saying, hey, someone made an architectural decision a long time ago. We had one company. What they did is they started with the lead object. All right. But then when they converted, it converted that lead to a custom object. Okay. Instead of an account and a contact or an opportunity. Then they worked that custom object as the opportunity, as the actual deal. And then once that was closed, they used the opportunity for the actual it was the build, all right, of a project. As soon as we got in there, like sirens going off. Okay. There's so much code that's running that's unnecessary to take a lead when you convert it and create a custom object instead of the other stuff and try to do everything that's supposed to do for no reason. There was no good reason. So it's things like that where we see people go outside of the normal process without really knowing what they're doing, where they're getting in trouble.
Okay, so very interesting. So we are going to go one layer deeper here. And I don't know, if you know this, if you go into some other ecosystems, for example, HubSpot is going to be your probably closest competition, I guess, because they have fairly similar offerings as you guys do. Obviously they are different. The data model is going to be different. The industries that they are targeting where they are going to be successful is going to be fairly different as well. But one of the things that people don't realize when they talk about this whole customizability is, yes, everything is customizable, but then they are going to have limitations in general. Okay, every system tries to be as expressive as possible, I guess, if you ask them, right? Because they are going to run into issues. So for example, if you look at HubSpot, I think HubSpot has a limit, even with their enterprise plan, that they can probably have 6 custom objects. I think after that, and I don't know, if you are going to have different opinion, I guess, then you ask a reseller versus HubSpot official, but they do have that, and they realize that, and every system is going to have some sort of limitation. Have you seen similar limitations? Where is that limitation? Let's say if you say Salesforce, I know that you have mentioned that, if you try to hijack this whole opportunity and try to create your own and then come back to the main flow, in my mind, it's not going to work.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us some technical limitations of the platform itself that people might not know, I guess.
Yeah. And I am the architects on our team are much better at answering like the specific limitations. There are a number of custom field limitations, right? But it's super high. I think it's like, don't quote me on this, somewhere around 300, right? Custom fields or something like that.
Custom fields are okay. Custom fields typically, you are going to have custom fields don't cause as much problem. The problem always is going to be when you are trying to hijack the whole object, the whole screen, the whole workflow. Sure. That's what you were trying to mention, I guess.
Yeah, and on the custom object side, on the Salesforce side, I don't know what the minimum is, but it's hundreds. It's not it is. I don't think I've ever run into a client who came anywhere near the maximum custom objects that they could build or anything like that. Where we do see them run into limitations is data storage and file storage. We do see them run into limitations to that because the way data storage and file storage works with Salesforce based on your contract is you get a certain amount per user that you have.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll have some companies who want to store like these large files, these big contracts or heavy image, and they want to store it somewhere. in Salesforce for easy access.
Let's store that CAT file inside Salesforce.
Exactly, right? Not a good idea. There are apps out there that will, when you upload that file, it will snub it. It will go save it in either SharePoint or Dropbox or something like that. You'll have a link to it.
Exactly.
So you can get to it easily, but you don't want to store it there. So file storage is the big one that we typically see people struggling around. But otherwise, technical limitations, again, like I am not the right person to speak to some of the API limitations or how Flow is Salesforce's automation tool, some of the limits around building flows and stuff like that, which then tell you, so Flow is drag and drop, right? Flow is more of a declarative tool.
Yeah.
And then you have Apex, which is the Salesforce's programmatic language. At some point you hit limitations on Flow where hey, I've got to go to Apex for this. Okay. Unfortunately, I am not the best person to answer those specific questions, but there are some of those where, again, if you don't have the right person, they might be trying to do something in Flow where the correct developer or architect would know, hey, don't waste your time in Flow there. It's not going to work. You're going to hit limitations. You need to go to Apex and write it in code.
Yeah. So let's go back to some of these stories, I guess, and the challenge that we typically run into. And, I'm going to reference the comment that you mentioned in between just a little bit. And that was the 100 custom objects, right? So I don't know if those custom objects are going to be 100 layers deep, or is this going to be a parallel hierarchy? Those two are very different things. When you are going to be 100 layers deep, okay, typically when you look into these very complex scenarios of the data dependencies, object dependencies, it gets very, very, very deep. I'll give you a story, and then if you have a follow-up story, maybe you can tell me that as well, right? So we are dealing with a lot of different businesses, okay? And sometimes, these guys are going to have vague ideas that, I want a CRM. Okay, you want a CRM. Okay, let's get you a CRM, okay? Now, the way they describe CRM is going to be something very, 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 very different. Okay, in their mind, they are thinking, I have got this business. I have my vendors, I have my, buildings that I am doing maintenance in, I have my tenants, and this is multi-layered hierarchy of business objects in that business where you have the property owners, the building owner, I don't know what all, okay? And we have not seen this kind of complexity even inside, to be completely honest, even inside ERP systems. Okay, it might be harder to model there too, even though they are designed for those deeply nested business transactions. For example, when you get into manufacturing gets really deep. When you look at these, it becomes very hard even for ERP systems to be able to process those transactions, right? So I don't know if you're going to have any sort of stories. So in this case, let's say if this customer is coming to you, would you take this? How would you approach this? This story, or maybe any other story that you might be able to.
Yeah. So, the benefit of using something like Salesforce is to relate those objects vertically, right?
Right.
Vertically and then horizontally and then vertically.
So when you say vertically, define that a little bit. Let's say if listeners are not.
Yeah, sure. So let's take the account object, for example,
Yeah.
right? The account object in Salesforce is kind of like your umbrella. That's what everything is tied to. If you're a B2B company, right? If you're a B2C company, things are different, but I'll speak from a B2B perspective.
Yeah.
So you've got that account umbrella. Under that, right, if you go vertically one layer down, you're going to hit the contacts object and the opportunities object.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Under opportunities, specifically, you go vertically down and you're going to hit opportunity line item, right? Which is the different products that you've added to the opportunity, right?
Yep.
And if you branch out, what you actually see is that over to the right, horizontally with opportunities is products.
Yeah.
And down below products, it's hitting opportunity line items as well.
Yep.
Those two objects make your opportunity line item product, right?
Yep.
Make your opportunity line item. So there's two types of relationships in Salesforce. There's lookups and then there's master details.
Right.
Right. So a lookup allows you to be a little bit more vertical in the structure of objects. You can at any point. So if I'm on an opportunity and I want to, when I'm creating an opportunity, say I want to relate the contact who was the lead source. Okay. So when I'm filling out my opportunity, one of the fields is lead source. I'm going to go look in my contact database and I'm going to select that was John Williams, who was the lead for that. Okay. That's a lookup relationship. they're tangentially tied to each other, but they don't depend on each other.
Right.
Okay. Whereas, say from an opportunity, you want to have an object for contracts.
Yeah.
Okay. That contract is solely tied to that opportunity. That contract does not exist without that opportunity.
Right.
It's not possible because it's all built on that opportunity. Okay.
Yep.
At that point, you've got a master detail relationship. The opportunity is the master. The detail is the contract. Okay. So that is directly vertically tied to each other, all the way up into the point of where you can't delete that opportunity without deleting that contract. The system won't let you. It'll block you because you've got dependencies there. And then it wouldn't know where to put the contract, right? It can't just go into space.
Right.
So that pure verticalness is that master detail, but then you have those horizontal branches off, which is that lookup relationship. But it allows you to tie everything together. So in the end goal is when you go look at an account, right? Company XYZ. Yeah. Just from that account, you can click around and see all of this information. What are all the sales I've had in the past and the products that we were trying to sell them? What are the contracts tied to those potential sales? What cases have they opened, right? It gives you what Salesforce brands as the customer 360 because we have all those relationships vertically, horizontally with very little limitation on how many we want to build outside of users being able to actually use this.
Yeah, so very interesting details. So I guess we are close to our time right now. Time flies. I know when we get into these details, right? It's so much fun. So I don't know if you're going to have any sort of closing advice for our listeners.
The advice that I always give, especially on podcasts at the executive level, is get more people involved in the valuation of these systems than just the high level decisions, right? Get the actual end users involved. That'll ensure that you get the real ROI on the system because they've actually got to use it. So get their opinion early and don't just focus on what the executives want out of the system, which is typically analytics.
Yeah, could not agree more. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be whichever systems you are using, just know the limitations of that system before trying to implement in something where they might not be comfortable with. So on that note, thank you so much for your time, Hunter. This has been a powerful conversation.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you would like to learn more about Hunter or Kelly Austin, head over to kellyaustin.com. It's KELLEYAUSTIN.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to get you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.